Hi, I'm Rabbi Zoot, and welcome back to the channel. 2 weeks ago, we read an interesting Torah portion that's always left me a little confused. We read about just after the Exodus from Egypt, just after the Israelites have crossed the Red Sea, they are attacked by a group of people we call Amalek, the Amalekites. And this group is widely considered throughout history to be the worst people to ever attack us. They're described throughout the Torah as having attacked us to prey upon the weak and the old and the young. They are said to have gone about their business in horrific ways. They are usually used as the foil for all of the bad things that have ever happened to the Jewish people. But what's curious about that Torah portion 2 weeks ago is that we read that we should blot out Amalek's name throughout history. We should remove it from everywhere so that they may be forgotten. The worst punishment God can come up with is they will be erased from history. What's the problem with that? What's confusing about that? Well, we're reading about it in the Torah, which we've been reading on a daily basis for 2,000 years. So clearly we didn't do a great job of never talking about them again. Now, why would it be that our Torah would tell us to blot out the memory of someone by putting them in our sacred texts? Well, it's because we're supposed to remember the atrocities they committed so that we never become them, so that we never are put in a position where those crimes can be committed again and where we can tolerate that kind of behavior from someone else. Does this sound familiar? Unfortunately, it does, because this past week, a Tennessee school board made the decision that they were going to ban a book. Book banning is usually the first sign of a terrible problem in our society, and maybe not the first sign we've had. But when a school district tries to ban a book, it should pique our interest because we should wonder, what is it they're trying to prevent from happening? The book in question is a book called Mouse. It is a graphic novel detailing some of the atrocities of the Holocaust from the perspective that gives access to younger people to be able to engage in this conversation in a way that lets them see the horrors that were perpetrated against Jewish people, and also lets them engage in a way that is a little bit more relatable in the worst possible way than a textbook. Now that's exactly what makes Mouse a target for things like a book banning, because from the best possible interpretation of what the school board was trying to do, they said, we don't want our kids to be exposed to something so scary and so hard and so difficult. Now, that's nice in theory, but it doesn't work. Because the simple reality is this happened in the history of our world. This is something people did to other people. And by pretending that didn't happen, by pretending it doesn't exist, that doesn't prevent us from having to suffer for our actions that led us here, or suffer from the consequences. And so in the best possible way, they're doing a miscarriage of the opportunity to make sure their kids are kept safe. But unfortunately, we don't have enough evidence that this came from the best possible place because it coincided a little too well with Holocaust Remembrance Day. If that isn't a coincidence, that means that this is a targeted attack telling the Jewish community and the community at large that we are going to silence what happened to you because while you remember the Holocaust, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that no one knows about it, that it isn't a part of our cultural conversation because we don't want to be held accountable for the consequences and for the actions that cause so much hatred, so much hurt, and so much challenge. That's a devastating thing to feel as a community that only 2 weeks ago was experiencing a terrorist attack, as a community that has continuously and repeatedly been told anti-Semitism is on the rise and there's not a whole lot we can do about it. Book banning. Are we really there? Is that really where we want to be as a society and as a culture? In the age of the internet where we can see everything and read everything, are we really going to take art off the shelves in order to replace it with the drivel that we put on the internet, free of facts and free of consequences? We have to have a serious conversation in our country about what are the values we're trying to uplift and how do we use our religious and ethical backgrounds to ensure that we're creating a more just, more thoughtful, more righteous world, not one that it feels cozy, but is actually a gilded form of ignorance. We can't stand by while we ban books. Throughout history, every example of book banning and book burning has preceded an attack on a way of life that we hold sacred. Democratic countries do not ban books. Countries that value freedom, liberty, and justice for all do not withhold information to ensure that some have it and some don't, or, frankly, that anybody doesn't. We have to have faith and belief that if we give information, even to children, that good ideas will rise to the top and bad ideas will be shown to be bad ideas. That is getting more and more challenging. The more our relationship with the internet grows, and the more we look to restrict how information is passed between one another. If you think critical race theory is a problem, show me why with facts. I'm happy to engage in the conversation. I'm happy to engage in why do we need to talk about some things in school and not other things in other places in school. I'm happy to talk about why we as a culture need to have certain conversations and need to ensure that we use certain data more importantly than others. But what I'm not willing to do is I'm not willing to educate our young people and tell them that books are the problem. The problem is the restriction of ideas that make it so that we can't have meaningful conversation, and instead we're playing on the ignorance of one another. That's taking advantage, and that's setting us up for a later time when atrocities can be committed before we're even paying attention. I'm paying attention to this one, and I ask you to pay attention with me. We need to have constant conversation about what information are we using to have our discussions about what's important to us, and how do we ensure that we're set up for success moving forward. And if this confuses you, confounds you, or makes you uncomfortable, I encourage you, please visit my contact page, and I'm happy to discuss with you why we need to do a better job of lifting up good, valuable information, and why we cannot participate in a community and a world that says information is the problem. Because at the end of the day, knowledge is the solution. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.